Hello, I'm Mimi Bliss, and welcome to Essential Presentation Skills for Attorneys. What we're facing with presentations, whether it's formal or informal, is that attention spans are short. And when we're talking to people, they're busy. It takes a lot to get their attention and to communicate information. And we work in a global economy. We may be working with people who are in another country, or it may simply be if we're in a meeting, some people may be from the United States, others, English may not be their native language. So it's really important that we be clear. All of this means that our challenge is to be very clear and concise when we are communicating. Public speaking is a core leadership skill. As an attorney, you're often presenting. It could be informal in a meeting. It could be something more formal in front of an audience or a conference, or you could be talking to a client virtually. What we're going to focus on are the core techniques that will make you more effective as a communicator and allow you to have more influence. We'll focus on 3 core skills. These are the things that I see day in and day out that make a difference. Sharpening our message. We can always be shorter and sharper. Engaging our audience. Are people paying attention? Is this about them and not us? And speaking with confidence. That's what we think of as speaking skills, our voice, our gestures, our pause. And we'll go a little deeper there as well into virtual because that's a part of what we're doing now. And I'll focus on the techniques that we've heard really throughout the years of doing these CLEs that people say are most impactful, which is short, actionable tips, things you can remember and use on a weekly, if not daily basis. My perspective comes from news media. I was a TV news reporter for a number of years here in Nashville and in other markets. I've had my business, Bliss Communications, for about 25 years, and I focus on presentation skills training like this, as well as media training, which is preparing leaders to speak on TV and in the media. I work with clients globally, nationally, locally, across Tennessee. Work quite a bit with professional services, including law firms, and including government and large corporations. 5 steps. We're going to walk through 5 elements, 5 steps that give you those actionable skills. I'd like to start with connecting with our audience. It's always audience first. If you're not sure how to start, how am I going to begin? I don't know what to say. Start with audience. It's about them, not you. This is about what the audience wants to buy, not what we want to sell. There's a podcast called Think Fast, Talk Smart that I really like. It's from the Stanford Business School. And one of the quotes, it's all about speaking and communications. A quote that really stood out for me was, "Speak to inform, not impress." So this is our starting point. It's about the audience. What are they looking for? What do they want to buy? What information can we provide that's of value? And trying to stay away from, oh my gosh, I need to impress them. I need to show them I'm good at what I do. I need to show them I'm smart, I'm informed. You know what I find is the moment I go down that path of, oh gosh, what are they going to think of me? I need to impress them. Like rarely do things go well. I do better when I start with what information are they looking for? What's the value I'm providing? Start with the why. Why are we there? What's in it for them? Why is this important now? It's context or strategy or a sense of urgency. Here's more about starting with the why. One of the most common questions I get is, how do I begin my presentation? What I recommend is we start with the why. Why are we talking about this topic to this audience? For example, if we're making a business presentation and we want to create a sense of urgency, something is important, I might say something like, we are seeing a shift in the industry, or we've come across something new. Get right to the reason you were there. If you're speaking to an audience, you could say, as I look around the room, I see people from all across the company. If you're doing an informal update, maybe presenting up catching someone in the hallway, I might say, hey, you had asked me to let you know if anything changed, and here's what we've got going on. So the next time you're thinking about how to present your ideas, be sure to begin with the why. Number 2 is choose your words. This is the most actionable advice I can provide. If we do nothing else, if we choose our words more carefully, we will be more effective. Short words, short sentences. The Harvard Business Review did an article late 2022 about how great leaders communicate. It got a lot of attention. The quote that really was sticky for me was, use short words to talk about hard things. If something's complex, if it's difficult, or people are struggling with it or not sure they like it, short words, short sentences, keep it simple. The moment we get into really long sentences that never end, that just kind of run one sentence into another, like nothing good happens. We go down a rabbit hole and around in circles a few times. Stop, start a new sentence. Short words, short sentences. And it starts, the way to get there, eliminate minimizing words. Get rid of those fillers. I'll talk a little bit about just means we're just sort of starting in the middle of the sentence and we make it sound like it's not very important. I'll just take a quick minute or a few minutes. Oh no, there is nothing quick happening here. I know it's late in the day, everyone's tired. They weren't tired until we told them to be. What I call the Twinkies of filler words is we're excited. The reason it's a Twinkie, all sugar, no substance, and more important, like a Twinkie, we cannot stop at one. No one says we're excited once. That would be okay. We typically say it 4, 5, 6 times, and it just becomes filler. What we want to do is be very intentional. Eliminate the minimizing words. Instead, pause, take a breath, have silence, and start our important sentences with flag phrases. Examples of flag phrases are, the critical issue is, my ask is, our next step is, what we learned, what we found, our focus is, what's important. The purpose of a flag phrase is to start the sentence in such a way that we, when we're speaking, stand up straighter. We sound, more convinced. We have more conviction. And the audience says, "Whoa, this must be important." An easy way to remember that, W words. What's important is why we are taking this step, when we will move forward, who will be involved. Under pressure, you can remember a W word. Start with a W word. Think about a flag phrase you could use when speaking in a meeting or a presentation. And the flag is the way that you start the sentence. It's not everything you say, it's the way you start. These are the examples. And I will say, to wrap that up, if we do nothing else, if we pause and we flag important information, we will absolutely be better, whether we're speaking in a meeting or delivering a speech. It can help with our notes as well. We want to have key phrases and short sentences in our notes. I like having those flag phrases in the notes, because if I kind of forget where I'm going or I get off track, if I look at my notes and I see, okay, there's the flag phrase, there's the way I start a new thought, I'm going to regroup really quickly and sound like I'm on task. We're seeing a shift. Here's how it would work. What I recommend. I like to also write pauses in notes. The pause, the silence between thoughts, is as important as what we say. So the notes are the place to put it. I prepped a client for a big presentation a few years ago. She was introducing President Jimmy Carter on the stage of the Ryman Auditorium in downtown Nashville. Who wouldn't be nervous? And after I heard her speak, I said, wow, that was great. You were so confident and you really paused between thoughts. And she said, well, I did what you told me. I'm like, what did I tell you to do? I wrote pause in my notes, and that always stuck with me. The pause matters and the notes will make it stick. And think about practicing aloud. Outsmart Your Brain is a book around the neuroscience around communications and learning. There's a significant amount in this book about presenting and public speaking and the difference between familiarity and learning. Familiarity is, I took notes, I know a lot about the topic. Yeah, I'm good. Learning is actually practicing aloud. Not 50 times, not 10 times, 2 times, maybe 3. My experience is the second time we say something aloud, it's half as long and twice as good. Just saying it aloud will allow us to self-edit, get crisper, be more concise. Number 1, connect with your audience. Number 2, choose your words. Number 3, don't bury the lead. A characteristic of top performers is the ability to get right to the key issue. I get that from a book called Great at Work. 5 years of research about what separates people who perform at the very highest levels from everyone else. And it really is that ability to say, what really matters here? What's the key issue? And we really need to keep something called the dilution effect in mind. And that comes from a professor at the London Business School. And the dilution effect is we just intuitively, like, we know something's important and we want to say it, and then we feel like we need to add 3, 4 more things on top of it. Why not, right? 5 is better than 1. The problem is all we do is dilute our message. Instead of, 4, 5, 6 things, making it sound even more convincing, we just weaken the entire presentation. People don't know what the point is. They're not convinced. So think about focusing on what's really important. Don't dilute the message. What matters? Get it out, be clear. Here are some examples of how to make a short, repeatable key point. One I really liked that I heard in a workshop that I did for an organization earlier this year, one person said, what we found is shorter but more frequent meetings are more effective. Shorter but more frequent. Easy to repeat, easy to remember. That's a key word. He's not diluting. Another example that I remember from a client this was, back in 2019, where we invested, we grew. His point was where the company invested capital in new buildings and new structures, we grew the business. Short makes a point. Zillow, great company for messaging. It's a word, it's almost like a verb, right? Zillowing, everybody knows it. One of their good quotes that you could find out online is Zillow makes scheduling a home tour online as easy as booking a table at a restaurant. Easy to process. It's the example. It's the comparison. So the idea is quality over quantity. Have a simple point when you present, make it short, make it repeatable. And then tell stories, not process. What we tend to do is get really deep into process. We want to share everything we know. It's really abstract. We lose people. Stories don't have to be sort of long and elaborate. And, oh my gosh, I got to be a storyteller. To me, that feels a little overwhelming. We just need to be concrete. Made to Stick is communications research around what people remember and what they forget, written by professors from Stanford and Duke. And what the communications research found is concrete stories and examples are stickier than abstract concepts. I call it throwing candy in your presentation. Like, what are they going to go, oh, wow, I like that. What is irresistible? The idea is something can quickly repeat something. They go, oh, that's interesting. It can be both important and interesting. What's the vivid detail? If you can remember one thing, pause and flag, use those flag phrases. If you can remember 2 things, point plus example. The idea is to make a point in a sentence and then give an example. It's harder than it sounds, but go to an example. People will get that. Here's more. When I prepare leaders for presentations and speeches, there are 2 questions I ask that provide the most value. The first,
what's really important here? What really matters? Number two, could you give me an example? What happens when I ask the first question, what really matters here, is that it requires that we focus on the key issues, the key points. We get that message down to a sentence, not 8 slides. What helps when we use the second question, what's an example, is we really hone in on something that's concrete, an example that's relevant to the audience, that will allow them to understand the message. So I recommend the next time you're getting ready for a presentation or a speech, make sure you can answer those 2 critical questions. What really matters here? And could you give me an example?
Here's an example of point plus example. Going back to what I had earlier, the point could be, we found that shorter but more frequent meetings are more effective for mentoring. For example, when I first worked with my mentee, Susan, we had weekly meetings. And the problem was we'd meet after she had her staff meeting, which was really new because she was a new employee. And so we'd talk about the things that, gosh, she wished she'd done. When we switched to twice-a-week meetings, we met once on Monday to prepare for the staff meeting that was held on Wednesday. So she was ready to go. Then on Thursday, we'd do a short debrief. What worked, what didn't work, what could she use the following week? Much more effective. And for her as a new employee, it got her up and running far quicker. Make a point, give an example, tell a narrative, tell a story, be specific. And simplify data. So often we are presenting data. And you may be, especially if you're in a large organization, that we need to have some data behind what we're doing. It can't just be, hey, here's what we think is good. You want to have numbers. What's important, though, is we tell a story with the data. It needs to be accurate, but it can't just be, hey, here are the numbers. They speak for themselves. For example, I worked a couple of years ago with a person who was a pretty significant finance job. And the reason we were working on presentations is a feedback from, the big boss, for lack of a better word, was, hey, so-and-so really needs to work on her ability to tell a story with the data. Like, I'm worried that she's presenting it not at a leadership level as she should be. Where's the story? The idea is connect the dots. Tell me what the numbers mean. That's a core leadership skill. That separates you from everyone else, makes you more valuable and more influential. Making Numbers Count is a book about presenting data, written by professors from Stanford. Here's the before version of how to present a piece of data. Go ahead and read this. A lot of numbers there. You're being asked to do a lot of math. Here's the after version. The video game industry is more than 4 times the size of the movie industry and about 9 times the size of the music industry. Context, comparisons, telling a story. You can then go more in depth, but first give people a sense of why this matters. And this really applies to everyday communications. I was working with someone a couple months ago, and he was working to talk to his boss about his recommendation on how to prepare for a potential strike with package delivery. It didn't happen, but the potential UPS strike. And he said, I really feel good about the plan. I feel good about this, but I'm having trouble convincing my boss. We just get down in the weeds talking about numbers. And we're like, okay, let's try doing it high level. Be ready with the specific numbers, but don't get so into the weeds from the beginning with every data point, every number. Go high level first, be ready to give data points. So we got it all ready. He went, did his meeting. 2 days later, I email him like, how did it go? And he's like, it went great. He took my advice, took my recommendation. It worked. I went high level, spoke at a strategic level, why it was important, connected the dots with the data. He did ask for more detailed numbers, but we didn't go down the rabbit hole at the beginning and just lose the point. So the idea is, what's the high-level story of the data? And simplification can be really important.
We all know that we need data to support our recommendations. We need numbers that back up what we're saying. Where people run into trouble is going down into the weeds of lots of long numbers. It's 1.0536, or then we ask them to do math. We rattle off 3 or 4 percentages all in a row and leave people confused. So when we're speaking aloud, think about using round numbers that people can process. It's a little more than $1 million. It's 21 feet. That's about the height of a 2-story building. Or it's the length of a football field, 100 yards. Or that's about double what we did last year. Round the numbers and put them in context. People are more likely to listen, and they can always go back to the printed materials for the exact figures.
What sticks with you as we think about clear points, giving concrete examples, simplifying data? Take a moment to think, even jot something down. What sticks with you? What can you use? Before we go on, I'll share why I do this. What I have found, especially in virtual, but really in any kind of presentation, it's important to build in those pauses or those breaks. You might, if you have notes, we talked about write it in. I find the easiest thing for me is actually to add a slide. Like just give people a breathing slide to process the information before I race on to the next thing. Or do divider slides between topics. Slides that don't have a lot of content, they serve as a road sign or a marker to say, okay, we're going to pause, change direction, start something new. Use the slides to remind yourself to give people a moment to catch up. It's almost with the pause is where you catch them. And people are, oh, wait, now I'm listening. How does this apply as we think about longer presentations? What I recommend is that we block our information, divide our presentation into sections. So in all fairness, if you're speaking for 20 minutes or 40 minutes or 10 minutes, if you're speaking at a conference or you're doing a training or you've got to update a client, it may be a little longer. You're going to make more than one point, right? Like the dilution effect, you're like, wait a minute, I got to make more than one point. Like it's not that simple. The idea is you can block things out so there's more than one point, but there isn't more than one point in a single sentence. So if you look at the blocks, I think of the presentation like, okay, start with the green block of information. Get my point across, give something concrete, take a breath. Go to the yellow block of information. Get that out. Make sure there's something concrete, a clear point. And before I go on to red, maybe in between, I do something interactive. I ask a question. If it's virtual, I might run a poll. Do something that signifies we're changing direction. So if there are 3 points in our presentation, I'd block them out. Like start high level with a point, go deep. Start high level, go deep, rather than just kind of the long and winding road. And I'll come back to this in a moment and actually draw out visually how I might structure a presentation. Another way to think about it and to put together all of the content things we've talked about is what I've developed called a 4-step outline. Starting with the why, start with context. Why are we here? What's important? Where's the sense of urgency? Always start with context or the why. Make a point in a sentence, not 8, shorter, but more frequent meetings. What's the point in a sentence? Giving concrete examples. What's the story we're telling here? The story with the data, not just slide after slide. And then concluding with a clear, intentional next step or a question. What's the short, forward-looking statement? Intentional questions are important. The idea is we don't want to fall off a cliff at the end of the presentation, or even like after we, speak for 3 minutes in a meeting, we don't want to fall off a cliff with any questions. We've just given up control. Intentional questions are something like, what questions do you have about the timeline? We're directing people to the next step. What information do you need to make a decision? And we presented you with the options. What other information do you need to make a decision? We're directing it toward, okay, we need to reach a decision. Or if you're facilitating a meeting, I might say, I want to hear from everyone. Sarah, I'll start with you since you're the project lead. Sometimes when I ask for input, at the end, I may say, I want to hear from everyone. So I'll ask you to give me your best, 15 seconds, or give me in a sentence what you think is happening here. That's more for training. It's not appropriate for every meeting, but the idea is ending with something very clear. Here's more on those intentional questions.
The purpose of a presentation or speaking in a meeting is often to engage people in conversation. So we want to think about how we're going to conclude. It's all too easy to fall off a cliff and end with, any questions? We want to be more intentional. We could conclude with, our next step is, my ask is, what I recommend. Or if we're looking for feedback, we could say something like, are you comfortable with this approach? What would you like us to consider as we move forward? What are you seeing in other parts of the company that would be relevant to the work we're doing here? The key is to think about how you're going to conclude. When you're more intentional, you're more likely to engage your audience in productive conversation, which is why you were doing the presentation in the first place.
Before we go to speak with confidence, I'm going to walk you through visually how I would prepare for some presentations. I'm pulling up the whiteboard. And I'd say, so many people are doing virtual presentations now, or just virtual meetings. I love the whiteboard. It's a way to engage people. It's on Teams, it's on Zoom. And I'll sometimes take notes as people are talking so they can see I'm hearing them, I'm recording it. It's like people just sort of perk up when they see the whiteboard. They do it every time. So let's do two kinds of presentations. One is very informal, like say you're an associate and you're briefing a partner, or you get a question in a meeting the client asks, or you're part of a large, you work in government or a corporation and you're asked to briefly share something. That's where I might use that 4-step outline. So to remind you what that is, it's context or the why. Start there. Then you go to a point, and that's one sentence, not like 8. And then go to your example. And then your next step or your question. So the context or the why could be whatever background they need. And, I try to think of it visually. The moment I start writing out a script, like nothing good happens, word for word, I get flat, I can't remember. Just think really simple, think, what's the why, why I'm starting? Maybe it would be, hey, there's a new development. We have a new development with blah, 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 blah. Get their attention. What's the sense of urgency? Or it could be, let me just make it clear, this is context. It could be as something simple as you asked me to, the idea of, let you know if there was a major, change or twist or whatever it is. And there has been. So I'm alerting you. Again, you asked for this. Something to get their attention, why we're here. All the things we talked about earlier. Then I'd get to your point. The key issue, I'd flag it. The key issue, or how about this? What concerns me, concern is even a little light, me is, or what's significant about this change is blah, blah, blah. Then I'd go to the example. For example, with this latest development, we could see costs increase or risk could change or something very concrete. And then pause and really think, what am I going to ask them, right? It could be something like, we'll monitor in coming weeks, and alert you to more changes, no action recommended at this time. Or it could be, something more, our recommendation is X. Are you comfortable with that? Or, we need to take out, you see where I'm going? Something short, we need to take action. What would you, here are your options. What would you choose? Something very clear at the end. So the idea is visually, you're only trying to remember like 4 things. Start with the why, make a point, give me something to support it, go to a next step or a question. Easy to remember. You could communicate a lot of information in a minute or 2, and you'll come across as a leader. You'll come across as an expert. You're concise. You've got their attention. Now, say you're doing something longer. How would you take all these things and use them? I mean, say you're speaking, like doing a presentation, you got PowerPoint, all that stuff. I am sure these erasers keep getting better. I would actually block it out. Like when I'm using slides, I go like this, like slide 1. Then I'd go slide 2. So say the first slide, that might be my title slide. And in my mind, my notes, what I'm thinking of doing is I want to have the why, start with the context. And, our focus today, something about what you'll do. Try to keep it fairly short, tie in the title. You could have an agenda slide next, if you want to have that. Let's see. So you could have an agenda. Oops. Well, I'm not very good at handwriting with this. Okay. Agenda slide. But then I try to get into something meaty, like get into a section, block it out. Get your first block of information. You have a headline, some data, start high level. Then you might pause and ask a question. Then you'd go to your next slide and your next slide. And then somewhere at the end, you have that question and next step. But I kind of block it out, and I try not to have too many blocks. Really think, like, what are the key points here? But actually blocking it out visually, and even thinking about that before I create slides. And the idea being, as a reminder, am I doing the context or the why? Do I have clear points, examples, and the next step? And we'll get a little more into slides later. I'm going to stop share. As a side benefit, usually when you do whiteboard, whether it's Zoom or Teams or whatever you use, it is automatically saved, or you can click save, and that can be helpful for note keeping. One moment as we go back to the slides. So thinking about that was all content. The next piece is really about how we say it. So the content, focusing on the main point, concrete examples, solid structure, all important. It also matters how we say it. It starts with your feet. Give yourself a solid foundation to stand on. Weight distributed evenly on both feet. These feet are a little close together. I'd rather have them about shoulder width. And if you want to walk, walk for a purpose. Here's more about walking. How we stand makes a difference in the way that our audience perceives us. If we're a little nervous or we're anxious or we really haven't prepared as much as we wish we had, we may kind of lean or shift our weight, or worse yet, just kind of wander back and forth, right? Just hanging out up here. It may feel comfortable, but it's incredibly distracting, and it can make us appear uncertain or unsure. What we want to do is distribute our weight evenly on both feet. So if I look down, it's like, okay, about shoulder width apart, that's pretty good. I have a solid foundation to stand on. Then I can use my hands, my voice, I can pause, make good eye contact. Everything is more credible and authoritative. And if I want to walk, walk for a purpose. Take a step forward, pause, make a point, pause again before moving. So the next time you're preparing for a presentation or a speech, before you go on stage or get in front of the room, look at your feet. Make sure your weight is distributed evenly on both feet. This is important too when we're presenting with PowerPoint. I can't see the speaker's feet in this photo, but I know that they're facing square to the audience. Her feet are facing forward. She comes across as more confident and more intentional and more engaging. And she's fairly close to the screen, and that's a good thing, because that way she can engage with the content on the screen and the audience without turning her back to people. Avoid clasped hands. The moment we clasp our hands and we lock it down, everything goes flat. Our voice gets monotone. It's difficult to pause. I work with people virtually a lot, and at least once a week. And I can think of this week, I think it was yesterday. And I said, are your hands, like, what are you doing with your hands? I was working with someone and she said, oh, they're clasped like tight. I'm like, I can tell. I can't see them because we're on Zoom, but I can hear it in your voice because your voice is kind of tight and flat. You don't really sound like you. You don't sound very warm. You don't sound convincing, and your face is flat. So the moment you find yourself with your hands kind of locked down, like, think, wait a minute, I gotta reset. And elbows off the table, same thing. Whether you're sitting in a meeting or you're speaking virtually, what we tend to do is we hunch over on our elbows, like it's comfortable, like I get it. The problem is, again, we can't pause, everything's monotone, we're flat, we lose our impact. People are less likely to listen. And here's why. Who's talking? The person on the left or the person on the right? It's the person on the left. Open, natural gestures, leaning in. The person on the right, sitting back, folded hands, really good for listening, not so great for speaking. And you'll notice people are really impactful, often sit up and lean in. It's not formal. You can still be conversational and natural and approachable when you do this, but you're more engaged. And the key place where it makes a difference is in your voice. It allows you to be a little, what we know from the research from Rutgers University and the Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania is, if we're a little louder and we vary our voice and we pause between thoughts, we're more persuasive. Voice matters. The louder is especially important often for, like, if you're a little earlier in your career and you feel a little tentative. And it's not even a volume thing. It's more of a frame of mind, right? Like if I say, hey, that was good, do it again, but a little louder, people will stand up straighter. They'll sound more confident. They'll have more conviction. And the variation is just, if something's important, it's worth a little oomph. Pause is probably the number one thing that I hear from people is, hey, that made a difference. I hear this in workshops. For example, we did this workshop live for the Bar Association. And at the end of the workshop, I asked each person, what will you take away? And the number one response was pause between thoughts. And here's why. We have all been there. We're giving a presentation or a speech. We're doing a media interview, and we start to pick up speed. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. The words are just running together. And our audience can't process what we're saying. We're speaking, we're saying the right thing, but they aren't hearing it. And the standard advice that we get in those situations is, hey, try slowing down or talk a little slower. And the problem is, it doesn't work. What I have found that does work is to pause between thoughts. Get out a complete thought. Take a breath, pause, start another thought. When we pause, it allows our audience to catch up to what we're saying, and we come across as more effective, more authoritative. So the next time you're speaking and you find yourself picking up speed, think pause, pause between thoughts. And remember, some of it is remembering it, some of it is putting it in those notes or having slides that are like built-in reminders to, ooh, take a breath. You know, the PowerPoint is showing me a simple slide, like a transitional slide that helps me stop, take a moment. And we can even pause with our eyes. Maintain eye contact through the end of the sentence. It's just so easy to dart, right? We want to look around and there. It's like, oh, I need to look at everyone. And what happens when we dart is we're really not focusing on anyone. And we need to maintain eye contact for about 2 or 3 seconds for it to be impactful. But no one is like up here with everything else going on, going 1, 2, 3, change eye contact. So the easy way to remember is just get out a sentence and like him, you know, when you're pausing or before you move on to the next sentence, change eye contact. And if you find yourself darting, be really intentional. Say something, say it like it matters, take a breath, pause with your eyes. Speak with punctuation is the easy way to remember all of this. It all comes under this bucket. Think about if you were writing, right? If you wrote a whole page of information with no punctuation, it's just like one long run-on sentence. It's really hard to process. Same thing when we're speaking. Punctuating when we're speaking is like, hey, a paragraph break. Whoa, that's a divider slide. That's a good deep pause before pivoting to a new topic. You might have an exclamation point. This is really important, but it's not exclamation points after everything. It might be a comma or a period. The idea is we punctuate. And if we think punctuation, we'll remember to pause between thoughts, to use our voice, and to pace things so people can process what we're saying. Think about one technique that sticks with you. We'll look at virtual now because that's such a big piece of what we're doing. And it really is, it's video, you know, and my background's in TV. So the first thing I think of is, okay, how am I coming across on the screen? Look at the man in the middle and you'll see the rule of thirds. What that means is his eyes are just about in the top third of the screen. I can see enough of his shoulders to see the top of a pocket. And that's what I always use because sometimes I'm doing virtual and it may be in a different location. You know, it's not here. And so I'll be adjusting the camera or doing things differently. And I'll go, okay, if I had a pocket, could I see that? Ooh, I can't. Well, then I need to adjust. Because the problem is we end up with like a teeny tiny bit of shoulders and a bunch of space above our head. It's hard for people to focus in on us. And really being aware, you know, sometimes you'll see like people will be talking and like they've literally got their shoulder to the camera. It's hard to focus. And it can also depend, like there's some meetings that, you know what, it doesn't matter. But if it's something important, like these things matter. We want to adjust our computer or our camera so it's close to eye level. Like a stack of books will do miracles. Yeah, I remember when I had to go home, I was at my parents' house and I was doing some virtual work. And I thought, gosh, I don't have my little table and my stand. And my dad's old law books from law school were there. I was like, who knew? You know, I stacked them up. My dad was just delighted. He's like, I haven't looked at those in years. So the idea is get that camera or that laptop up at eye, so the camera's around eye level. No one looks good looking down or looking up. An ironing board can work miracles. You know, men, I know I'm traveling more for work, but when I'm traveling, I'm still doing virtual. Like someone still may need prep for a speech, or I might do a virtual workshop. And I go in the hotel room and I'm like, whoa, you know, nothing here really moves. You know, how am I going to set this up and look professional? What I found is I can really do virtual from anywhere if there's an ironing board. I set it up so that I'm facing the window. I get the camera around eye level and I can put like the desk behind me, you know, something that looks professional. And the ironing board will go up and down. You know, we can use it at home too. And then I look at the camera. It's really hard. We want to look at the floor or the people on the screen, mostly at the people on the screen. We're like, oh, making eye contact. I'm moving around. No, we're not. When we look at the camera, it appears we're looking at the people. And there may be times when we stop and we look at the people, we're listening. When you're opening up a presentation, looking into that camera makes a difference. And it might be, putting a piece of paper, like a colored piece of paper, like right above the camera. I also, something to draw your attention to that. I also know people will put a monitor, they'll put the camera, they'll do it so that the camera and the people's faces are really close. And that way they can kind of do both, but be aware of your eye contact. And how we sit makes a difference. Here's a video on how to sit in virtual. So often when we're presenting, we're sitting at a conference room table or seated in a virtual meeting. What I recommend is that we sit up. We want to avoid kind of this, right? Elbows on the table, weight down, or even this, leaning back. Looks like we're not really very interested. Clasped hands will kind of make us monotone and flat. Instead, we want to sit up and lean in. A little space between the back of the chair and our back. Hands above the table. Open, natural gestures. That will energize our voice and relax our face. So the next time you're speaking when you're seated, remember to sit up. You'll appear more engaged and more confident. And what I would always say is on virtual, I can't see your gestures. I can hear them in your voice. And the same thing with video. If you're doing a recorded video, like for a website or something, that you might see hands the way you do in this video, but if you're using your hands and you're leaning in, I hear it in the voice, I see it on your face, in your expression. And standing up is a really good option for important virtual presentations. So this is me standing, and what it does is it's just easier to use my hands to be engaging. And I talked to a client I worked with, I think it was in January 2020, and then things, opened up, and I think it was the fall of 21. I went out to the West Coast to work with some other people at this company in person. And the person I worked with virtually said, that virtual media training session we did to get ready for media interviews, said the most important thing I took away is I stand up if something's important. I'm like, oh, and it just works every time. I cannot stand like all day for every virtual presentation. The moment I stand, it gets better. And if I'm doing a media interview, it's worth standing. As a side note about this picture, I actually don't do virtual presentations from that office anymore. And part of the reason was, if you look at that hardwood floor, it was echoed, and so that's the carpet wasn't thick enough. I found like thick, ugly carpets are better for sound. The other thing to think about is a green screen if you want to use a virtual background. What the green screen does is, if you use that virtual background, like with the logo for the organization or the firm, is it gets rid of that weird halo effect, where your hand comes in and out, or like your hair looks funny, because the green screen makes it easy for the virtual background. Without a green screen, if you've got like your refrigerator behind you, it can get a little funky. I know one law firm, they said, oh yeah, we ordered those things on Amazon that the attorneys can put behind their chairs and they pop up. And it's just like a quick green screen behind your chair. What's behind me is actually a canvas backdrop. It's a trade show thing, that you would set up at a trade show. If you do these a lot, it's really worth doing. I do know one law firm that did that. I think they keep it in the conference room, in a conference room. So if people are doing, let's say, a virtual CLE or an important meeting, they can have that behind them. Lighting is number one thing. When we did this workshop live, I was surprised at how many people said lighting was their big takeaway. Soft lighting on your face is better than backlighting from windows or harsh overhead lights. If you look at this picture, and it was a partner in an accounting firm sent this to me early in the pandemic, because I was like, wow, you look great. Your lighting is super. What did you do? She's like, this is what I did. I took just some lamps. I put them on the other side of my monitors. Soft lighting on my face. Low budget. This is a photo from Zillow headquarters in Seattle. I said, hey, can I take the photo and use this in my workshops? They're like, sure. I love it because where they could, the workstations face a window, and where they can, and in every workstation, they have a ring light, soft light on your face. You look better. It's easier for people to focus. The only thing to watch, as a side note, is facing the window is make sure the sun is not setting. I have done that and literally like it blinded me as the sun set in the window. This is a photo from an office of an attorney in Memphis. He joined the live workshop when we did this in 2022 and sent in the picture. And his point was he just moved his monitor and his laptop to face the window, and then his lighting was pretty good. And sometimes those office building windows, the light is diffused. So it's actually quite good. And he said, I really didn't need a light then. Like the lighting was fine. I just had to face the window. Here is a 15-second video that really demonstrates that difference between backlighting and lighting your face. The audio is very low on this. You're really more looking rather than listening and seeing the difference with the type of lighting, whether it's on your face or behind you. Lighting is important when you're talking in a virtual meeting. My lighting here is pretty good. Well, that's because the lights are on the other side of my computer. They're lighting my face. Look what happens when I'm backlit. Not good. And I would always say too, if you can turn off the overheads and have enough other light on your face, it will always be better. Like overheads are tough. An external camera is always going to be higher quality than your laptop. You know, the laptop cameras, and they may be getting better, are typically not ideal. So if you look at yourself and you go, oh my gosh, this is awful, it's turning me, weird colors, you may want to look at an external camera. But try to set it up in a way so it's still close to eye level and not like so perched so high on the monitor, that it's looking way down at you. And think about being camera ready. The key here, when I think about what we wear, typically deep solid colors are better, like deep reds, purple, blue, something that contrasts with your background and just sets you off. Typically less is more, not a lot of busy patterns, but make sure it covers your shoulders. Like think about how it's going to look shoulder up. Will it look professional on camera, given the way you're framed? We had a question when we did the workshop live about hybrid meetings, because this is a lot of what we do. 3 tips. Number 1 is set expectations up front. When I send out an email for a hybrid meeting, I try to be really clear, like, hey, this is interactive. So whether you're joining virtually or in person, we're really going to be asking for your feedback. That gives people kind of an alert, like, ooh, I can't really multitask. But if it's just something where they're going to be listening, like I let them know that too, right? Like this is listen only, because maybe they could take it from the car or they don't need to have their camera on. So number 1 is set expectations that are really clear. I also find if I tell people it's going to be an interactive meeting and they're going to be in a spot like the car where they can't interact, they will email me and tell me, and then I know. Number 1. Number 2 is if you can, you see in this picture, like the person who's joining virtually is almost there, right? It's almost part of the table. It's better if you can set it up so literally they're right there rather than sort of way off somewhere really high up. That's number 2. Number 3 is be intentional about how we facilitate. Active facilitation. If I'm leading a hybrid meeting and I want to get input from everyone, I might say, I'd like to hear from each of you. Let's start with the folks around the table, and then I'll go to Susie and Joe on Zoom. And I have seen people like clearly, whether they were fully paying attention or not, when I give their names and I say, hey, we'll be going to them shortly, like they're ready when I get there. So I just try to give them a heads up. Be really intentional about giving them an opportunity and also give them a heads up. Number 5A is visuals, and that pulls together everything we've talked about in terms of simplicity, blocking our information. I like to use the slide as a guide. I start with the headline. It's the first thing I say. Speak to my pictures. They're not wallpaper. They're there for a reason. less is more? Can people glance at that slide and get the point? Here's more about using that slide as a guide, so it's very intentional. The feedback that I get is one of the most valuable tips for presenting with PowerPoint is to make the headline the first thing you say. So I'll demonstrate how that works. I'm going to pause. What I recommend is that we use flag phrases to emphasize what's important. An example of a flag phrase is, and there I go. What was important is that I paused. So I'm on the title slide. I pause. I have silence while I advance it. And then I start with the headline. I recommend that we use flag phrases. I don't have a bunch of filler. I'm going to talk about what you can see here up on the next slide. I just pause and use the headline. The effect is that I'm more concise and it comes across as a more effective and authoritative speaker. Here's an example of a pretty bad slide that I made. Too many words, long sentences, bad headline. Here's the exact same information in the slide that the client actually used. Short, simple headline. Our largest business here in Upper East Tennessee is a major defense contractor that serves the entire country. The photo would be a reason to talk specifically about that company and what they build. And then each little key point, it's just a phrase, easy to read, easy to present. We always feel more comfortable if we had those long sentences, but they're actually harder to present because we don't know whether to read, we don't know where to look. We just need a prompt. So the slide's a guide. Headline, picture, key points. The clicker and how we use it is important. A very common mistake when presenting with PowerPoint is to use the slide advancer or the clicker like a remote control on a football game. We stand up, we're pointing, we're waving, we're clicking. It's very distracting and it actually doesn't advance the slides. Like it doesn't work that way. You don't want to point it at the screen. So instead, the clicker or the slide advancer, it should be invisible. It's just there in your hand. When you advance a slide, you shouldn't see my hand move. So the next time you're presenting with PowerPoint and you find yourself waving that clicker at the screen, take a moment and think invisible. The invisible clicker. It's hard not to wave it at the screen. In conclusion, we want to be intentional. Whether we are briefing someone in the hallway, talking on a virtual meeting, or doing something more formal, like speaking at a conference or moderating a panel discussion, be intentional. What's our point? What really matters here? Have we started with the why? Are we giving concrete examples? Is there a clear next step or question at the end? I often find like what I put into it on the front end, what really matters here, the focus is the most important thing I do. After that, things get easy. Think about your next steps. What will you take away from this workshop? What I recommend is pick one thing, maybe two, and really focus on it. It could be pausing. It could be simple slides. It could be, start with the why, but take one thing and use it because you'll probably see it moves the needle. You're more effective. People pay more attention. You're more concise. As follow-up resources, you'll get videos, the videos that were in the presentation, as well as about 2 dozen videos with those short tips, about a minute each, and a digital handout with the information. There's more on my website, or feel free to email if you're interested in more of the videos. Article I really like is How Great Leaders Communicate from the Harvard Business Review, easy to Google and find. My favorite podcast on communications is from the Stanford Business School. Think Fast, Talk Smart. It's got lots of this information in depth. So thank you and good luck.